So we have our material. And now what we want to do is we want to mark all of our lines for cutting. Now when you're marking your lines for cutting, you can use soapstone. The only problem with soapstone, it's fairly wide, it's flaky, it can wipe off really easily, but at the same time, it's not that accurate. Now, if you want to improve accuracy of your line and get a finer line out of it, you can use an oil pencil. This will give you a pretty fine line, but again, it wears out and then the line will get wider the more you use it. Now, if you want the most accurate line for the most accurate cutting, you want to use this guy. This is a scribe. Now, what a scribe does, it actually scratches a line into your material, so you get a really fine line. Typically, these are going to be a carbide tip or a tungsten tip. They're going to keep a really fine, sharpened point on the tip of it. Now, when you are cutting, just remember, you are cutting a frame out for miters that go inward. Both ends have to point in. So when you're doing this, there's one more thing to consider when you're talking about hot roll or cold rolled metal. You can see here that there is a seam, a black seam, where the metal is fused together as it's being milled into whatever shape it takes. Now, you have to figure out where you want this. Do you want it on the bottom? Do you want it as an accent line on the outside? That's something you need to figure out because it's basically gonna determine how you're gonna cut your material. So, if we want it to be on the bottom, what we wanna make sure to do is find our line, there it is, and make sure the miters go on the opposite sides of it. So if this guy's on the bottom, we want to make sure right there. That's where our miters want to be. Now, when you're marking down your miters, easiest way to do it, rafter square. Greatest thing about rafter squares, that very edge of this square here is going to be flush. It's going to be the line that goes down the vertical side of your cut. So when you're making your lines, we want to make sure this guy is on the bottom. So we'll turn that like so. And then if we're making our miters like this, actually we want to be on the inside of that, you can just go flat against this, and there it is. That's going to be 45 degrees, and that's the line we're going to want to follow. Now, if you are cutting with a chop saw, you're going to want to give yourself a little bit of fudge room, okay? You want to do what's called a rough cut. You want to rough cut this close to your line, but you don't want to go on your line. Reason being is some chop saws, especially consumable disc chop saws, have a tendency of drifting a little bit. The blade is going to walk a little bit as you are cutting. I'm going to show you a couple ways to remedy this, but you might still get a little bit. Something that's going to help you out a lot, especially if you're working in a small confined area like a small garage, is you may want to cut the lengths of material that you need for your frame and your legs first before you start mitering. Because miters, you want to make sure that your miters are going in toward each other, not like so, with each other. The first thing we want to do is we want to cut all of our pieces out of our material first. So we're going to have 4 pieces for the frame and of course 4 legs to make a table. We're going to do it a couple of different ways in order for you to see how many options you have. Some people might not have a chop saw, so we're going to demonstrate with a grinder and a chop saw. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to cut the lengths. We're going to use that particular method first. We're going to cut all the long lengths first, then go to the shorter pieces. So our coffee table is going to be 28 by 40. So we want to cut all of our 40-inch sections first. So let's go to the chop saw and do that. Now, the thing to understand about a consumable disc chop saw, they're not that accurate, okay? Usually, if you're gonna use one of these, it's gonna be for a rough cut. So that's why you wanna be extremely accurate. Probably the most important thing you can do is be very accurate with your measurements. That means putting down your scribe line correctly. But when you're going in to set up your grinder, there's a couple of things you have to notice. First thing, does the blade make it all the way through your cut properly so you can cut through the entire piece? Does it hit your table? Make sure that doesn't happen and you're set for the correct depth with this depth adjustment nut here. Next thing, your angles. So this does have a measuring system for your angles on the back of this, but sometimes they're not that accurate. So what you want to do, using your handy rafting square, line it up with the cut area. This is usually going to be the most 90-degree from your disc. Line it up, make sure it fits properly and you're getting a true 90-degree if you're cutting a 90-degree. Also, you're gonna wanna do this when you're cutting your 45s, your miters. So, the first setup we're gonna do is we're gonna cut all of our lengths first. Start with the longest ones and move down to your smallest ones. So, in order to do that, we are going to, our coffee table is going to be 40 by 28, or I'm sorry, 28 by 40. What we wanna do is make sure that the first cuts are 40 inches. As you can see, I already put down my scribe line using my rafter square. So once I have that, I want to do a rough cut. I want to give myself a little room, just a little bit of breathing room. Whatever you're comfortable with, 1/16 of an inch, 32nd of an inch, maybe even an 1/8 of an inch if you're just having some issues or you're just starting off. So bring it down and make sure that this plane right here of the blade is on the opposite side of wherever you measure to for your cut. As soon as it's in there, lock it into place and start cutting. Here we go. Now, as you can see, I could still see my scribe line, but I got about a 1/16 of an inch that I need to take off with my grinder. So I'll use a flap disc for that. Sometimes consumable discs can walk on you. So you're gonna have to take that out and adjust it accordingly as well. Usually if you keep your line lined up correctly, you'll get pretty much a 90-degree, but you will have to adjust it. So that's my first 40. I got another 40 to cut, plus my legs and my other two sides. So I better get to work. When you are measuring, take your tape measure, measure out the length that you need. We're doing 28, so we want to put our scribe right on 28. As soon as it's there, you can either make a little bit of a scratch or just push down into the material. Remove your tape measure, bring your square up to that point, and do your scribe line. But as soon as you have your scribe line, it's always a good idea to double check your work. Make sure that is an exact 28, which it is, so that's when we are going to cut. I have all the parts cut out for my top frame, my two 28s and my two 40s. Now it's time to cut the legs. I've determined that I want all of the coffee tables that I'm making right now to be 20 inches tall. We have 1.5 inch square tube, so I have to take the dimension of the material away from the length of what I want the height to be. So we are gonna cut ours to 18.5. So what I'm gonna do, same method, I'm gonna line up 18.5 for my scribe line, put my scribe down, and use a rafter square to make sure my scribe line is correct, and then I'm gonna check my work. As soon as I have my line set up, it's ready to cut. When you're cutting your rough cuts, you can also use a stopper. I have a stopping plate set right here. So all I need to do is, as soon as I have my measurement, I bring this down into a position, what I like, give myself a little bit of wiggle room, clamp it down, And then what I could do is I can bring my stopping plate up to that end. So each time I bring that material up to the stopping plate, it should be the exact same length as I had it before. So I'll make sure to clamp that into place really well. Now, this works extremely well if you're doing a lot of the same rough cut over and over and over again, especially with table legs. We're gonna be making 2 or 3 of these tables, so I'm gonna have almost 12 to 16 of these legs that I have to create. So I'm gonna do a lot of cutting. Here we go. So even though I said our lengths were pretty spot on, I always want to double check my work. So what I'm going to do is, using my square once again, I'm going to line up perfectly this very inner edge where they're going to connect. And then I'm going to go to the opposite side of both of these and make sure that they're even on the opposite side as well. So I'm just going to line these up perfectly for that inner edge, and then go over here and check. Okay, so I have this front guy here, I have about 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little bit of extra meat on this particular one. So I would want to match this to this. So what I want to do, scribe a line, make sure it's perfectly lined up with that, then use a file or your grinder and clean it up to make sure that you still have the same angles, but at the same time they're the same length. So that one, this particular one, I gotta take about 1/16 of an inch off. And this one, I'm gonna line up with that innermost edge once again, make sure those are actually spot on. So with this one, all I have to do is clean up so my metal is shiny, but at the same time, I also want to clean up all the burrs and get rid of all the debris. So that's where I'm going to start. So this one is the first one that we're going to grind, and we're going to match that length. So what we're going to do, clamp our material to our table and make sure we keep that nice and 45 degrees. We're going to scribe a line 45 degrees where it needs to be. Then we're going to grind it down and match it to this one. So anytime you are going to grind on anything, make sure that you secure the piece that you were working on firmly with a clamp. Any kind of clamp will do, C clamp, F clamp, adjustable clamp. So we're going to use this quick F clamp here and just secure it to the table so that piece is nice and stable. It's not going to move around on us while we're grinding. And of course, always use proper safety gear. There it is. Perfect. All right, so now I got these nice and even, and it's on to the prep. That's cutting with a chop saw. Now, if you don't have a chop saw, maybe you only have a 4.5 inch angle grinder and you would like to learn how to use that to cut miters with, go ahead and click on this link right here, and that will tell you all about how to do that. Now, we are gonna move on to our prep portion. Prep is cleaning up all the weld areas, making sure we have nice, shiny, metallic metal to weld on.